5-year update. In addition to that 5-year update, every single July, the state requires the county to report its progress in the comprehensive plan. So if you're interested, you could look back over the last 6 years that we've been under the plan and see what progress the county has made according to the county. One of the things that is often frustrating, and we hear this from time to time in terms of, why is it that the state can't play a bigger role in regulating government, specifically land use in Sussex County? Title IX in the state statutes gives the municipality, all of the counties, as well as municipalities, the power to amend or repeal zoning regulations, maps, and ordinances. The statute requires state review of certain projects, but does not give the state approval authority. It is explicitly an advisory process. The state may comment, but the county decides. And too often, we face this situation where we're getting what we believe to be help and guidance from the state, but at the end of the day, the state only performs an advisory role. So what is in it for the state? Unlike jurisdictions where you may have come from, those townships or towns or counties had responsibility for many of the public services. Not true in Delaware. The state has skin in the game, and they have guidance relative to the comprehensive plan for a couple of these reasons up here. 90% of the state roads are funded by the state. Excuse me, 90% of all roads are funded by the state. 97% of police protection in the unincorporated areas, I'm not talking about Lewis or Rehoboth, 97% of that is funded by the state. 30% of the paramedics throughout the county funded by the state. 90% of public school transportation, public construction, and public school operations, all significantly funded by the state. So this is why the state is involved in the comp plan process, because they hold the money bag, right? They provide resources through funding that the county could not provide on its own. And part of that involvement is a document that's about 10 pages long that outlines from the state what they expect in a comprehensive plan. And what they expect, some of it is required, some of it is optional, but they play a fairly heavy role in providing guidance to the county. And then secondly, once the plan is put together, the state has the responsibility to review, and they can push back and they can ask for adjustments, but ultimately the role of the state is advisory. So let's take a look at the plan itself. This is a picture of the front cover of the plan. The plan has 12 or 13 chapters, also known as elements. What you see there are the elements in the comprehensive plan. First and foremost, they do a very deep dive of the population and demographics. This is supplied by the Delaware Consortium. That data is used then to determine where we're at in terms of population and demographics. Candy bar time. Give me within 5,000 of the population of the state of Sussex County. No? Higher. There you go. There you go. 245. How much have we grown since 2010? How much have we grown since 2010? What percent? Frank, he must have read my notes. 40% since 2010. That's a big number. So essentially, for every one of these elements and or chapters, there is a snapshot of where we're at with each of these. And then there's a set of goals, objectives, and strategies that are laid out in terms of how do we get from where we're at to where we're going to be in 10 years or even in 25 years. In terms of each of these elements, if you're questioning in terms of each of these, I would highly recommend that you go to the current comprehensive plan by going to the county website and spending time in terms of each of these elements. One of the most busiest slides I have is this one here. The comp plan process is a 22-month process. It's broken down into 4 phases. The first phase is 6 months in duration. And like I said earlier, it's a snapshot of what the current conditions are, recent trends, and then how do we shape the future from where we're at today. There's a series of planning and zoning workshops, stakeholder group focus groups, public meetings, and leadership interviews during that 6-month time frame. The average council person attends 2 to 3 council meetings a month. Planning and Zoning Commission attends 2 a month. These meetings will be on top of their current workload. The next phase moves toward visioning, development, and framework. And this is where, through the information that was gathered in identifying opportunities, the county starts to take a look at what it would look like in 2055. Their primary concentration in that, what it will look like, is as it relates to how development will take place, as well as how conservation will be viewed, and most importantly, as it relates to what will the transportation needs be 25 years out. Through a series of public and stakeholder input, again, planning and zoning workshops, public meetings. If anybody was around back in 2016, 2017, they had locations throughout the county where they held opportunities for the public to come in. You've all, I'm sure, have filled out something on a little sticky note and posted it on where you were told to post it. That process of getting input from the public is what will take place at these public meetings. There'll be some 15 public meetings in the course of the 22 months. The reason why the yellow boxes, the first yellow boxes across the top, is that planning and zoning, the commission, is in full control of the process to this point. Other than interviews, leadership interviews that the commission and the consultant will do, is basically orchestrated by planning and zoning. Now, I mentioned consultant. Every single plan will have an outside resource consultant. In 2016, that was to the tune of about $700,000. The bulk of the work is done by the consultant. That's just the nature of municipal planning. Right now, a request for proposal went out. The request for proposal for the consultancy is due back at the end of May. And by July 1, they will have awarded the consultant And this 22-month process will begin sometime around the 1st of July or mid-July. Jane may have more information on that. In the third phase, this is where the actual first draft comes together of the comprehensive plan. Again, it's a series of workshops, public meetings, and public hearings. That's a 7-month process. They'll have a document at that point. That document then would involve bringing the council in to review that document. They'll make revisions based on county council input. There will be a draft that's finalized. It'll be sent to the state. And once the state comes back with its comments, and again, there's a very robust checklist of how the county needs to satisfy certain needs for the comprehensive plan. And it's not unusual for that plan to be tied up because the state doesn't feel that they've have done as complete a job as they needed to do. Once it comes back from the state, it will be it'll go through 2 public workshops. The Planning and Zoning Commission will have, a public hearing. Planning and Zoning will have a public hearing, and then there'll be a county hearing. The council will vote on it. So I'm imagining that in December of 2028, that plan will be completed, voted on, submitted to the state for certification by the governor. So that's the 22-month process. It will be kicked off sometime in July. There'll be a significant amount of time for public input, not only in terms of attending workshops. There may be an opportunity for public comment at the end of the workshop. Written comments are welcome throughout the entire process. And obviously with 2 public hearings, just like public hearings on zone applications, the public will not be restricted in terms of how much they want to say. Now that Bob Wheatley's no longer here, he won't ask you to sit down if you repeated something that someone else said. That has nothing to do with the plan process. That's just my simple observation. Throughout the process, throughout the comprehensive plan, by far the land use chapter is the centerpiece of the plan. And as you look at the land use chapter, it's full of all kind of maps. And those maps might be investment level maps and future land use map, zone maps, development activity, existing land use map. The most important map that is a byproduct of the plan is first and foremost the future land use map. This map and one other, and you've heard the term before, that being the force of law. Nothing in the comprehensive plan has the force of law. There are goals set, objectives set, strategy set, but none of that is law. The only 2 things coming out of the comprehensive plan is the future land use map and one other map. The future land use map essentially says that over the next 25 years, that's where we see growth taking place in the county. Now, the plan is updated every 10 years, but this map coming out of the plan, through the input from the meetings that take place, both with stakeholders as well as the public, that's how they see growth. Now, I don't expect you to understand all of those on the left-hand side. Over the next couple weeks and months, we'll be sharing with you more detail in terms of why the future land use map is so important. Second map is the zoning map. This is the current zoning map as of 10 o'clock this morning. And I say that because whenever there's a change, what do you think is required? They can change the map. So both the future land use map and the zoning map are two of the most important things that come out of the plan. This basically says this is where and how the county expects to grow over the next long-term 25 years, near-term 10 years. Because in January, when the plan becomes certified, obviously these zone map changes don't happen automatically. The state allows for an 18-month window for any changes coming out of the comprehensive plan to take effect. An 18-month window. I see Jane shaking her head over there. I think she'll explain why she's shaking her head when she gets the opportunity. But that's the way it is, the way it's been done. And despite the fact that everything that I'm sharing with you is based on how the plan went together in 2016 through 2018, I have to believe it's going to be pretty close to the process going forward. We'll know more about what that 22-month window looks like. I know we've had conversations with Todd Lawson, executive administrator for the county. He thinks if they can get it done sooner, they will. But certainly, rest assured that it will have to satisfy the state, and more importantly, it's going to have to satisfy the public. So results to date. So we're 6 years into the plan, right? This is one of the opportunities that SPC is going to take a look at. We're going to do a forensic on the comprehensive plan to date. I've been waiting to use that word for so long. The plan yielded over 100 strategies. Various numbers, but primary land use had the most number of strategies. And again, the strategy is what is the action plan to meet the needs of the county over the next 10 to 25 years. So in the 2018 plan, there were identified 100 strategies. Since that time, there's been a number of adopted ordinances. Some of them have been very meaningful. Wetland buffer, perimeter buffer, ordinances related to density calculation. No longer would wetlands be counted as part of a denominator for density, and several others. So the question is, was the ordinances that were adopted, how does that compare to the 100 strategies that the county laid out? The 100 strategies, again, was for a 10-year time frame. You wouldn't expect all of them to be accomplished. But I think we have to take a look in terms of how well did the ordinances map back to the strategies that were outlined in the plan. An interesting fact, too, is there were 10 FLUM changes, or future land use map changes. That's really important because the future land use map is the map that the county determined would be right to accommodate the growth that the county was expecting. So you wouldn't expect there to be a lot of need to make changes. County had 10 future land use map changes in the last 6 years. Newcastle had 3 in the last 10 years. Kent had a similar number. Again, I think the opportunity is to make sure in the upcoming plan that we really understand how important that future land use map is. And as there are interests that maybe don't like the plan doesn't fit for their particular needs, I think the county needs to stand strong. And again, that's just Rich Barrasso. That's not mentioned in the plan or the plan process. So again, the due diligence needs to be done with regards to, again, mapping strategies that were in the plan and to what degree did they result in ordinances, which then resulted in changes in the county land use codes. So what's your role? Certainly, we would encourage you to participate in public hearings and meetings, but if you can't, SPC is going to be the conduit between what happens during this 22-month process to keep you informed. We will make every single monthly meeting where we will have a component that will give you an update on the progress with the comp plan. Secondly, lend professional experience. We have so many talented people in the county. We have a lot of talented people in this room. Anytime that we can help the council better understand an issue, where we can bring an expert in for these workshops. Again, as I think about it, Jane and Jill, is to make your jobs easier, that you're getting the best informed information to make decisions, whether it's on a land use application or something as important as the comprehensive plan. And then the thing that really challenges us all is as it relates to, so what happens after the plan is certified? Because implementation, writing the plan when you've got a consultant that you're paying handsomely for, a lot of the heavy lifting is done. And sometimes too often, the way certain people look at it is that our job is done, when the real heavy lifting obviously comes in the implementation phase. I think the state has done a much better job going into this planning cycle in terms of how they have set higher standards for implementation. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to go to the county website and search for Sussex County Comp Plan. It's a 283-page document. You don't have to read it in one sitting, okay? Just sort of parse it out, I mean, what do we have? 3 more weeks of The Voice? When that's over with, then you'll have the opportunity to spend some time with it. You can also go to the state website to learn about the state's role in the comprehensive plan, as well as the state's state strategies. The state just published their 2025 strategies. A lot of those strategies have to do with land use and transportation and housing. Again, many of the elements that are in the comp plan. But equally important is that go to our website. We will create a page on our website, a tab. Pam, you know how to do that, right? Okay. We will put a landing page on our website to keep you abreast in terms of what's happening. Back in 2016 and 17, as part of an organization, where we sat through a majority of these workshops, a majority of these public hearings, and they weren't crowded. But I have a lot more confidence 10 years later in terms of how the public is much better educated in terms of what role they can play in the future of the county as it relates to how we grow and grow the right way. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pam, and Pam is going to touch upon a couple activities that SPC will be doing relative to the plan. So Pam, all yours.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to go over this very quickly because I know we all want to get in here from Jane. SPC is going to be very active in this comprehensive plan process. We feel like the plan really needs to be revisited in detail, perhaps overhauled in detail in certain areas, and it needs to have a lot of attention paid to it. So to that end, we're going to be advocating, monitoring, and communicating. So I'll start with advocating because that's probably the most important one. We already organized ourselves in terms of teams. You know, Rich talked about those chapters or elements that are in the comp plan. We've organized ourselves 4 teams that are going to focus on categories of those elements to help us do the report card, as Rich talked about, plus also start looking into what we want to see happening with those chapters and elements. And to that end, we're going to be asking for expertise from you all, if you have it. We're going to be drafting some things that we're going to be sharing with you throughout the course of this year and the coming months after. So that'll be a hello.
Please bring any materials to the circulation desk to be checked out. All of your main library, just probably whatever you're doing. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so we'll be doing a lot of that advocacy. We're going to be monitoring these public workshops and monitoring the activities that happen with P&Z throughout the development process and this consultant that they're going to be working with. I will say that it's possible that some of the council members, present council company excluded, might be a little reticent to do a lot of changes to this. They might be a little overwhelmed with the work that it takes, and given that it's going to be extra time and attention that needs to be paid. So one of the things we don't want to happen is that. We don't want it to be rubber stamped. We don't want this to be escalated past or glossed over. So we're going to be monitoring that very closely as time goes on. And again, we'll be looking to you all and beyond to help with that advocacy and help keep the pressure on that we really want to see some meaningful changes. And lastly, we're going to be communicating to you all and the general public what are the outcomes of some of these discussions and workshops, and how are they going to impact the comp plan and as a result our daily lives as the comp plan elements get discussed, implemented, and perhaps turned into future ordinances. So with that, in the meantime, we have land use reform working group issues that have been talked about at County Council as recently as yesterday, I believe, that Jane's going to get up and talk about. I think she probably has a couple comments on the comp plan process while I get your presentation ready. So give me a few minutes to close this down and get you started.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Pam. It's a really wonderful presentation, as always, when Rich stands up and presents, and Pam. We learn a lot, and he has a lot of history and expertise to share with us. So I don't know, I've lost you. Down area to move forward. All right. So you still need to get on back there, right? Okay. Okay. Fill the time. Yesterday, as Pam said, on County Council, we introduced 4 different ordinances. On next Tuesday, we will be introducing at least 1 more, maybe 2 more. And all of the ordinances that we introduced are a result of the Land Use Reform Task Force that Jill sat on, Christoph sat on, those I think the only people in the room that I see, and gave us. And I will say that I think the 4 or 5 or maybe 6 ordinances that we're dealing with are really important. And I think they go a long way to addressing some of the many problems we have, from the need to protect more open space, to protect our forest, to have a more robust and effective workforce Jim, sorry, a more effective workforce housing program. So those are some of the changes we made. At the same time, there are some very important complex issues that will be handled through the comp plan. So this is kind of the first phase of the changes that will come as a result of the good work that the Land Use Reform Task Force did. Okay, good. I'm not ready. Having said that, a couple more points. One more thing about the comp plan. The comp plan will really ground the changes that I'm going to talk about here in, as Rich has already pointed out, when we get to doing the land use map and the zoning map. That's where you really make it real. And we can say more about that in a minute. So that's how these two fit together. That's why this is sort of stage 1, that's stage 2. Secondly, I'll just say off the cuff, because I think we're going to move that process more quickly than it's been moved in the past. At least we're surely going to try. Each of the ordinances that I'm going to talk about right now, and the remaining 2 that will be introduced next week, will have a hearing. At those hearings, I urge you to attend, to testify, to make your thoughts, concerns, ideas known, because again, the changes that we're making, starting with these ordinances, going through the comp plan, is going to determine the way development is done in Sussex County for at least the next 10 years, if not longer. The ordinances will first go to planning and zoning, so that'll be your first opportunity to weigh in, and then they come to county council, so that'll be your next opportunity to weigh in. Now, I'm going to fess up here. I didn't do this slide presentation. In fact, it was done by Todd Lawson. And if any of you attended county council a few weeks ago, this is the presentation he did. But it was easiest for me to take this because it really covers the issues pretty well, and rather than redo it. So I'm going to probably skip through, the down one. Yes, so he is talking about how we're going to do this. And you notice he lists the first round of ordinances here. So the rental program, I'm going to talk about that in a second. The open space requirements, the interconnectivity and superior design issues, the subdivision in rural areas, forest presentation, going too fast. Forest preservation is one of the ones that did not get introduced on Tuesday. That's because we still had the state forester working on it a little bit, but I'm reasonably confident that we'll get to that next Tuesday, that'll actually get introduced. Okay, so the first one that we want to talk about is and let me just say one other thing. I'm going to go through these very quickly, but I do have copies of them here. So if you really want me to dig any deeper, or you have questions, or you actually want me to read any language, I can do that, but I think you probably don't want to go that far. At any rate, I'm happy to go deeper on any of these. As you all know, housing in eastern Sussex is too expensive for the people who work here. When we talk about the people who work here, we're talking about everybody from our physician's assistants to our teachers, to our servers, to our police, et cetera. They have to live out west and drive distances to come in. The county did set up a rental program to try and incentivize more affordable housing getting built. It didn't work. We've had, I think, one, if I remember correctly, two units, or two affordable projects built in this period of time. So it's one of the things that the task force looked at. What changes can we make to, in fact, get some workforce housing built? And some of these are, as you can see, they're reduce the setback requirements, reduce open space, adjust units down from 25%. So instead of requiring that a project has to have 25% rental units, bring it down to 15%. Now, some of us are a little worried about that one, not overly happy about that, but we need to get these ordinances moving through the hearing process, and in that process, should that number change one way or another, because there are those who believe it should be lower, we'll see. But that's one area that at least I have some questions about. And then adjust the unit pricing so that somebody can qualify who is 60% AMI instead of 50% AMI. And I think, well, here's Todd's reasoning for why we need to do this, 85 houses on the waiting list, et cetera. I'm not going to pause on that. But that gives you an idea of where 60% of AMI would get you in terms of what would be affordable for people earning 60% of AMI. So it's still quite meaningful. Let's be sure that if this change will get us to having more workforce housing units actually built, then we need to move in that direction. Okay, that's what I'm going to say about about the SCARP program, about the rental program, unless you, let me go through them and then you can come back and ask questions, because I want to be sure that we have a good period of time for questions. And there are five of these to get through. Open space. Okay, so there's several changes. One that I want to particularly highlight is the second dot up there, which is it changes open space requirements in subdivisions to 30% in the growth area. So that's, if you can visualize that map that was up there, that's the yellow blob. That was the growth area. That's where we are. Up to 50% open space in rural areas. Now, this is really meaningful. That's a meaningful change. And when I talk about that in relationship to another change we're making, that I think will be an important step forward in the objective to limit sprawl and to stop sprawl in our rural areas. It does encourage naturalized landscaping, natural vegetation, pollinator zones, all things that we desperately need around here. And just as an individual plug, if you haven't done this in your own yard, do it. I've made a pollinator garden. Y'all can do it. And it's fun and it's easy and it's great to see the pollinators come to your garden. So that's a little plug from me. What else? Okay, that's the rental program in very quick. Let me just see if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. No. We do build in, just a small point, but we are building in a review of the whole rental program. There's an actual date in a couple years from now to review the program to see if, in fact, these changes that we're proposing do result in more workforce housing. And if not, then take another look at what else or what we should do differently to incentivize more workforce housing. So that's an important consideration also. Okay, code update. This is getting a little wonky, but we'll go through it in pretty easy terms that we all can relate to. What we will be doing in terms of topics that we will updating is protecting more of what we called the scenic views, cultural and historic features, and put an absolute prohibition on any lots in wetlands. We just passed, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, a new stormwater control ordinance. One of the things, this is something that I've worked pretty hard for since I've been on, because one of the early votes I had to take was in an area where there was a lot of flooding because of the way the developers just cut down all the trees and vegetation. Then a storm comes along and boom, there goes all the water into the nearby creek. So we, I asked, and our county engineer, in working with the Sussex Conservation District, put together a new set of rules about how you clear the land when you're building houses that would minimize the sedimentation. So, the new, the update to 99C would ensure that developers have to meet that. Improving interconnectivity requirements is an issue that is important, that we, I think, haven't talked enough about or a lot about, but that, as you know, I live in one, we all live in one, where there's one way in, one way out, and if the road gets blocked, you're stuck, right? So this will not be appropriate in all circumstances for any variety of reasons, but where interconnectivity is appropriate and can work, we want to encourage more attentiveness to interconnectivity issues. That's just housekeeping. We're not even going to go there. It's, yeah, silly stuff. Okay, so that's, yeah, 99C, at least as I'm going to talk about it for the moment. What's next? Did it change? No, because I pushed the wrong thing. There we go. Now, you all know that we're, the whole district of Sussex County is AR1, right? And that one of the big struggles that the Land Use Reform Task Force had and dealt with many, many times, had discussions about it, is what to do about the AR1 designation. Because if you keep it the way it is one of the reasons that we have the degree of sprawl we have. It remains that the lands that we would like to keep more rural or farmland, forested land, open space, gets built on to some extent because they can, because of the AR1 designation. So there was a lot of discussion about changing that. That was a really tough set of discussions that I listened in on. And we're not going there. We're not going to eliminate AR1, but we're going to eliminate cluster subdivisions in outside of the coastal area or the, well, let's put it the other way. Eliminate them in rural areas. So what does that mean? That means that by allowing subdivisions of 7,500 square feet, I think it is, yes, 7,500 square feet, or 3/4 acre lots. Sorry, thank you. Moving it from 75, thank you, to 20, there we go. Got my numbers mixed up. Moving it from 75 to 20 means that you're disincentivizing the kind of development that we've seen here. You're disincentivizing it. If you want to build a development with big lots and lots of open space, because again, there will be a lot of open space requirement. Remember, 50% open space will be required. Even, and you can't, you have to have 20,000 square foot lots or 3/4 acre lots. It means you're disincentivizing the kind of subdivisions that we've seen built here over and over again. What else should I say about that? Cluster subdivisions would still be allowed in all the other areas. So this only pertains to the rural areas. So in town centers or growth areas, you still can have the kind of cluster subdivisions that we've seen. Have I dealt with everything? Oh, forest preservation. As I said, this wasn't introduced yet. It will be, I really believe, I'm counting on it. I've talked to the state forester, I've talked to Todd and everybody. I think it's going to be introduced next Tuesday. So we're going to adopt an actual forest definition to say what we mean by that, establish mitigation standards. There will be different requirements inside a growth area and outside. One of the things that we want to be sure we're focused on is recognizing that not all forests are the same, right? And that there are critical forests. We have to make sure, to the extent we can, they still are there. We have to protect our remaining critical forests, old growth forests. We have to the extent possible, ensure that there's contiguous forested land for wildlife migration and so forth. So this doesn't quite capture all the concerns that we have with regard to forest preservation, but I think it's going to, I hope all those elements I was just talking about will be part of what you'll see on Tuesday. That, yeah, we're not doing that yet. Okay, so that's where we are. Pulled it in about 10, 15 minutes. So I'm happy to have questions, comments, concerns, or clarifications as you wish. Nothing. Good. We're done.
I have a question back here there. There's a hand up back in the back.
He's coming with the microphone.
Thank you very much for representing us in this way. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask a question about the forest definition. I'm just curious if the new definition will include things like what percentage of native species need to be included in order to be defined as a forest, as opposed to species that are not native in the coastal plain.
Steve, want to help me with that? You know, the most honest response I can give you is I'm not sure, because I haven't seen the language. I have only talked to the state forester and who's actually putting this together. What I do know, and that earlier in one of those slides, when I may have gone over it very quickly, is that one of the changes we're making is we're requiring native vegetation. So in several different places, we're trying to emphasize the importance of planting native and pollinator friendly. So it's a consciousness that runs through it. I'm not quite sure how the definition is going to emerge.
Steve, do you know if that's been one of the considerations? Steve is a former state forester in Vermont.
The issue of invasives, I think, is going to be more dealing with new plantings that take place in these communities, and we're hopeful that there's going to be a more robust landscape plans required in new developments where they have to plant street trees on each house site. So definitely we need to come up with a good standard on the type of trees, native trees that are planted in the landscape. In terms of the existing forest, I think what we need to address is invasive species that are creeping into these natural landscapes. And when we set forests aside, you can't just forget about them. So along with these open spaces, we need to come up with management plans that talk about the HOAs doing that routine maintenance in terms of invasive control, removal of hazardous trees and what have you.
Steve is a great example of expertise in this community that we are pulling in and tapping for this project. So please, if you have that kind of expertise, step up. We appreciate it.
Just so quickly while we're waiting, just 1 second. One of the changes that I didn't highlight in the ordinance about subdivisions is that we are requiring a sequencing in which the first thing the developer has to do is identify lots that are to be preserved first. And then the developer lands, and minimize the impact on sensitive areas. So that is part of the changes that we're making. I should have highlighted that, sorry.
In the last two slides, you used the acronym RPC. Please forgive me for being ignorant, but can you clarify that?
Residential plan, residential plan communities.
I was trying to understand the first ordinance that was being introduced, and you spoke about workforce housing.
Ah.
Does that term apply only to rentals
Well,
and not to like houses for ownership? Is that, can you clarify that for me?
well, the Sussex County rental program is for rental units. However, I think we also, and that's what that one ordinance applies to. At the same time, I think there's work to be done to encourage, incentivize workforce housing for ownership as well, but that's not part of that particular ordinance.
The reason I'm asking this question is because I'm not sure that I understand why along the coastal development areas, along Route 1, basically from Hudson Road down to Bethany, like, why would we want to put in workforce housing there when there's not that much land there to begin with? It's very expensive. Like, why wouldn't you build these kind of workforce housing, either rentals or ownership opportunities, say like west of Route 5, instead of trying to force any more development from Route 5 eastward? And like, why wouldn't the emphasis maybe be on public transportation, increase? So if people developed housing along that Route 5 and westward, towards 113, if you build housing there, then people could take buses or some other form rather than try to squeeze in more housing in such a tight space. Just a question. I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I take your question. I think we all feel squeezed, right? Those of us who live in this part of the county. And so the thought of more squeezing isn't a happy thought. However, this is where the jobs are. And as much as I resonate with the call for better and more public transportation services, and I think we desperately need them, and it's a drum I've been banging on for a while, people, by and large, in order for public transportation to work, it has to be inexpensive and it has to be efficient. And we're a long way, maybe not from inexpensive, but we're a long way from efficient. So that if you have to, like, I know you're not talking about, I'll just give you an example, which doesn't speak to your issue, but if I wanted to take a bus anywhere, I first have to drive to the bus depot to get on the bus to go somewhere, and then back in my car, right? And I think that's often the dilemma, that in order to get to the bus, you have to drive there. The bus may not run frequently enough for you to, you may have to leave your house really, really early to get a bus to get to work, and then you have to get from where the bus lets you off to work. It's complicated. So first of all, I'm a big believer in public transportation. I'm a big believer in our need in this area to do it better, which means differently than we do it right now, particularly with an aging population. You want to get me off the road in about 5 years. Maybe 10, but you want to get me off the road in not too many years. And how am I going to do that when I live too far to walk to anything, right? So that's a different topic, but I do think we have a real public transportation need that we're not addressing or even thinking about, and there are creative ways other communities are dealing with this issue. But short answer is the jobs are here. Another part of the short answer is they're not building, even these programs are probably not going to get this kind of housing built unless we change the rules with regard to what you need to do when you build rental housing, at least for the county level, at the county level. And, there are still areas where Smart growth. Well, one other thing on this topic too. Is that if you want to get more cars off the road, you don't build more roads. If you want to get more cars off the road, you put people close to where they work and play and shop. That's what you do. And it's just, we know that from many, 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 many studies and examples. It's just over and over again. So actually, some degree of moving people here will help with our road problem in terms of congestion. But that's a longer discussion, and I don't want to get us too far down that, but yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'll be quick. Brief observation and a question. The observation, the terminal state of that trajectory of housing prices rising and pricing the workforce out of an area is what you get in places like Aspen and Jackson Hole, where you have a bunch of billionaires living who like to ski, but the people who need to run the lifts and serve them in the restaurants can't live there because they can't afford it. And those rich residents actually engage in what I'll just say is NIMBYism and say, no, we don't want the apartments built here. So when you have that kind of class stratification, it's broken in lots of ways. You need your workforce living where they're working. My question is, for all of you who may have some awareness, when it comes to the comp plan process, we're an interest group, if I can say that, and similarly, developers are an interest group, housing advocates are interest groups. Will there be a path or a structure for organized groups, such as a working group? I believe there was a working group for the buffer ordinance. Will there be an aspect of the plan process that will formally offer a seat at maybe a restricted table to interest groups like us, like developers, et cetera?
For the comp plan process you're talking about, you want to answer that, Rich? I mean,
There hasn't been in the past. I think that what it's going to come down to is they've got a schedule. And if they think that anything like that might delay the schedule, you're probably not going to get any interest on behalf of the county in doing it. But again, everything that we saw this evening was based on 2016, 2017. It may look different, but I think that it's really all about the schedule. Keep in mind that the Planning and Zoning Commission works, 2, maybe 3 times a month in terms of public meetings. We're going to double their workload. So there is going to be some pushback in terms of anything that elongates the process. I did have a question, though.
Okay, let me add that, as Rich did point out, and that's what I was asking you, there will be opportunities for public input. There'll be lots of opportunities. It's just not going to be the kind of work group that we set up for the outline.
My question's on affordable housing. So it's proposed that they're going to lower from 25% of the units needing to be affordable rate subsidized to 15. And that program is optional. If we don't get the results in terms of enough affordable housing units built, do you foresee, like in other areas, where it's no longer optional, it's inclusionary, and if you're going to build a multifamily project, you must set aside a certain percent?
Yes, no question. Absolutely. We're inches away from doing that, but we're going to give this one more try, and then we're going to bring down the hammer.
I have a quick question about the developments concerning with the landscaping and all. The roads and the new developments are so narrow. I don't know how fire trucks are going to get down there. And that is a serious concern.
Well, yeah, that should be code, right. Let me make a note of that and take that back, but that's not currently is part of that kind of code change. That kind of code change is not currently part of what we're looking at. It hasn't been part of the land use discussion, land use reform discussion, which is not to say it can't happen. What I've been talking about today and what Rich has been talking about also are things that are in play. In my case, the things I've been talking about in play largely because of the land use task force that we set up. That doesn't mean there can't be other code changes looked at and should be.
Is there somebody over there that has an answer, Rich? Do you? Did you have an answer, Rich, for that question? Okay. Okay, we have a question back here first.
Jane, we have a online person with the question. Bill, I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask your question. Bill, are you there? Hello, Bill.
My favorite question. Yes, is the answer. Yes. Let's go on and we'll come back.
So hold on just a second. I'm going to ask his question from the chat. You give me a minute. Okay. Bill Baxter says, didn't the quote unquote Mount Laurel Supreme Court decision prohibit not allowing all types of housing via zoning? Do you understand that question? Okay.
Do you understand it? State by state. Okay. Okay, I'm not even sure what decision we're talking about, but so state by state decision, so no, it doesn't apply.
It started in New Jersey, and there was a challenge, and basically the upshot was that if you were going to build, you must have what Rich just described. There must be a certain percentage of affordable workforce housing. Other states have, they don't call it the Mount Laurel decision, but other states have a similar provision. And while I have the mic, I have to tell you, we have consistently had a philosophy in this county to let business solve the problems. And we have had decades of business not solving the problems. It breaks my heart to think that we're trying yet another experiment, now going down to 15%, when the situation is in crisis mode as we speak and will only worsen between then and now.
You know what I say? I can't say that. Sorry. Get me some help. You know, Jill.
Where's the question over here?
Sorry, there she's.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. Oh, hi.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rich Innes. I have the very unenviable task of chairing the Lewis Planning Commission, which is, we are just embarking on our comprehensive plan concurrent with the county. We're actually going to be finished a little bit ahead of you if well, we will be on schedule. But my question is, actually a two-pronged question. How is the county planning to work closely with the municipalities so that we can achieve the desired outcomes? Because I think that is really critical. And secondly, Rich Barrasso mentioned that the comprehensive plan does not have the force of law. And what I am embarked on, I want us to write a comprehensive plan that does have some teeth in it, that is really written in a way that it's not just platitudes. It's not just, oh, we love open space. I want it to be able to say to developers that want to develop in areas where the state has not, what state has said explicitly, we don't want you to develop there, that we're not going to put in roads there. We don't have the infrastructure there. And yet you see huge developments going in there. And then the burdens that we are all bearing as a result of that. So I want to write a comprehensive plan that does have some teeth to it. And I just want kind of advice on and assistance on how we get there from here.
We also have a mayor.
As an answer.
We have a mayor here who would also like to comment on
just one
that
quick
question.
second before you do, because I just want to say, hi, Jill. I just want to say that I couldn't agree more, that I'd like to see the comprehensive plan with teeth in it that has meaning, not just the so-called. And one of the issues now is that the comprehensive plan is general enough. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think I've heard on county council a single application come before us that hasn't quoted how well their development matches the intent of the comprehensive plan. And maybe they're right, it may be true, but what does that tell us about the comprehensive plan as a useful tool in managing growth or in helping to control growth? Because if it kind of allows all development, then why have the plan? What the plan is no meaning. So
I think the mayor of Milton wants to respond to Rich's point.
All right, to Mr. Ennis's point, a municipal comprehensive plan is held to a different standard than the county's comprehensive plan. The county's comprehensive plan, the maps are the most effective thing. The written word is equally effective in a municipal comprehensive plan. Go to Title 22 and you'll find that information.
Okay, and Christoph?
Yeah, it's one of the strange things about Delaware, right? So their comprehensive plans for counties and municipalities have different weight, different importance, different status. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Christoph Touleau. I'm the executive director at the Center for the Inland Bays. Just to give you guys a heads up, there is a discussion at the state level. Keep in mind that the ability of counties and municipalities to make land use decisions at all is actually a granted authority. This is not God-given, it's not constitutional. The state has permitted these things to happen. So there is a movement afoot statewide. It's an informal coalition called the Rethinking Delaware Coalition, started by a couple of us who at one time were cabinet secretaries in state government and who actually were working on the Cabinet Committee for State Planning Issues, which still exists, was created by then Governor Carper to basically ensure that state agencies were aware of and a part of land use decision-making process in the state of Delaware. What we are talking about and where you can maybe get some help with comprehensive planning and putting teeth in is have the state say, your comprehensive plans need to be adhered to. And so rather than being advisory and through the plus process, which I won't get into, but this is where state agencies weigh in on individual development proposals, is say something's going to happen if you do something that is contrary to the advice coming out of the state agencies. That is one possibility. Another is to say if you develop in an area that is in investment level 4, by state standards under the state strategies. There was an opportunity to link to that here. I would suggest that people take a look at that. Investment level 4 is basically the equivalent of whatever that conservation area that the county council will be considering as part of the land use reform working group's recommendations. Those are places where the state explicitly says by map, we do not plan to invest, and that includes roads, sewer, water. We're not going to provide additional resources to schools, to emergency services, to all those other things where the state is in for hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis. And say that, if your comprehensive plan contemplates development in these places, an opportunity for the state is to say, we will not invest to support those developments in those places, rather than saying, and what happens is, localities, the counties, Sussex County is notorious for this, building in places that were not designated growth areas in their comprehensive plan, and then expecting the state to come in and build the roads. And what do you hear? DelDOT doesn't want to give us the money. Well, the reality is DelDOT's got a certain number of pennies to play with, but chasing then bad land use decision-making and building roads and building capacity, putting in all the other infrastructure that's necessary, supporting the schools, supporting the emergency services, all those other things that people expect when they buy a home anywhere in Sussex County. There is an opportunity, and if we all weigh in together to say, this is something that the state ought to consider as a state law, to put more teeth in those provisions in, I think it's Title 90, and say that, yes, we really mean what we mean when we say that you need to develop a comprehensive plan and you need to stick with it.
And it needs to be precise enough that you can stick with it.
I'll also add
So
that
it says what it means to say.
SPC is participating in that coalition, and we are conversing. We're part of that discussion.
Rethinking Delaware, yeah.
Just a quick question on the ordinances, which is great progress. Given the process that follows, when is the expectation that those ordinances will actually have impact?
Great question. So they are now written to have impact upon adoption. So if any of you have followed county council for a while, they have a tradition of passing ordinances that are in effect 6 months from the time that they are adopted. These are immediate. So that's one part of the question. The other thing that we're saying is that unless you have gone past a certain point in the application process, unless you're at the point where you have your letter back, lost the term, plus letter, thank you, went blank there for a second. The plus letter back, unless you're at that point, so if you're earlier in the process, these changes will apply to you. So. Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know, but because look, each of these ordinances has to have a hearing with planning and zoning, with county council, and then we do whatever changes we do, and then we have a final vote. So I have to believe we're talking about a process that's going to take 4 to 6 months. Now, I will tell you that we all are going to try really hard to move these quickly. So y'all pay attention, because you're not going to have a whole lot of time to comment on them. You'll get a notice that they're coming up. I think they're going to run them all right together. So you're going to have to, be ready and jump on it pretty quickly. Realistically, because both planning and zoning and council have to have their own hearings, I think we're talking at least 4 to 6 months. Hopefully not longer.
I have 2 questions over here. You don't have one.
Hi there. I totally agree with what Christoph was saying. I've been saying for a long time, the state needs to get more involved with what's happening down here, because we're so important to the state's economy, and it's just the right thing to do. In that regard, with the current process, with the comp plan, since the state has to give their comments and you have to respond to the state, I would recommend that people don't just do their public comments at the county level, but they go to the state people and tell them what the comments are, so the state will consider that in making their own comments, which will have more impact to have it coming both from the public and from the state, and the same types of comments that need to be done and put into the comprehensive plan.
I'll tell you, I'm going to have a moment of personal confession to you all. You're all going to not believe this, but I dreamt about Secretary Hastings last night. Secretary of Transportation. How sick is that? Because I was trying to talk to her. Because it's really bad, isn't it? Hello? I'm taking this job way too seriously. Because what? Because I have in real life spoken to her about my desire to see the Department of Transportation or any of the state departments, frankly, say no. And for a variety of reasons they don't. I don't know that can change. But I was talking to her last night in my dreams about that.
Good evening, Jeff Siemens here. Probably these 2 comments would be in the hope category. I'm not sure whether it was done in 2018 for the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan then, but I'm hoping as part of the visioning process that one of Rich's slides had I think there were 4 boxes over 22 months. I'm hoping that some kind of questionnaire could go out to the public across the county. And I know that there's somewhat of a divide of interest between coastal Sussex and, let's say, Bridgeville and West. But I still think that if there was some sort of questionnaire that asked people what hurts the most, where you live, that some kind of statistic at least could be calculated and presented, as opposed to just waiting for people to come to Georgetown to find a parking space, to come to a public hearing, to wait 2 hours to stand up and speak to give their opinion on what hurts the most. I'm hoping, and once again, I don't know whether this was done in 2018, that someone will think about a questionnaire that will go out to everyone in Sussex County, north to south, east to west, to give their opinion on what hurts the most. And the second hope is, as you talk about cluster, as it applies to growth areas and non-growth areas, I'd like to think that probably Jill's activism was born with a cluster project that sprung up next to her. Part of that project, the issue of superior design, and cluster in the zoning code demands superior design, but it's arbitrary and capricious. So as you talk about cluster, if you don't specify what is superior, then we're still in this holding zone of what makes a project really special to give them the benefit of going from a 20,000 square foot lot to a 7,500 square foot lot. So the questionnaire, hopefully to everybody, and thought as to what constitutes superior when it comes to a cluster. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good points. And I don't know how much hope I could give you on the survey question. Not that I won't try, but I do think your comments on defining as specifically as we can what it means to be for superior design is really important. I think we will make progress on that.
We have one final question here, Frank.
Sorry, I'm the final question. And I won't talk about my dreams last night. But to follow up on Jeff's point, and I'm kind of torn between the desire to move these ordinances quickly and get them implemented and the haste at which the last round of ordinances were introduced and implemented without a lot of consideration from some of the comments and hard work that a few work groups within SPC put together. I didn't think that, we beating the same banner about design standards, about, forest standards. I'm hopeful that the inclusion of the state forester into the forest preservation ordinance will bear a lot of fruit. But as we're talking about things that are still squishy, like including stormwater facilities as part of creditable open space when they emulate natural features.
Right.
Consequently, if you tear down 20 acres of woods and build 4 stormwater facilities, or what I consider to be borrow pits, because they're built 5 and 6 times the capacity of what they're needed, then we're kind of defeating ourselves by giving them credit for open space. So a lot of nuances to some of the things that are well intended. I think that this group can pull together and give some real common sense suggestions that I hope are taken to heart this time.
Yes. So a couple things. One, I did go through these ordinances very quickly because there were a lot of them and they get pretty dense. But I would encourage you all to go online and read them line for line, because some of what you raised, I think, is addressed. Not all of it, but some of what you raised is addressed, and some of what some other people raised here are addressed in the ordinances as they're written. Also, by going and reading, almost done, we're going and reading them now, you're going to be better prepared than to offer comments or whatever when they come up in the hearing. However, one of the reasons that we're going to move quickly with these particular ones is that we had a year, or I don't know, 10 months of a task force debating, discussing, reviewing, at which we were open to the public could comment. And so we're building on that, is all I'm saying. We're building on that. So it's not something that's just sort of come out of thin air, that there hasn't been a lot of thought and discussion gone into. Having said that, I would be the last one to stand here and tell you that I think they're all perfect or they don't need some changes or whatever. I am not saying that, but I am saying this is a process. The first stage was the task force, which did a very thorough review. This stage is the introduction of the ordinances that we think are ready to move, and we think will have some meaningfully important positive results. The next step is that ties it all together and really grounds these changes is the comprehensive plan. So that's where a lot of, and the zoning map that comes out of that is absolutely critical. So it's a process. And it's important, I think, that we keep this process on track and moving. And that as we have experience with whatever changes we make or fail to make, we'll look to address those in the future. But I think I think the county's taking a big step forward and finally beginning to wrap our arms around our various and many development problems. Thank you all. It's been great to be back.
Thank you, Jane, very much. And it's wonderful to have a council person who's so responsive and works so hard. April the